So coming to inflation, like we mentioned in the beginning, there was a release of new inflation series this month. So every 10 years, the Ministry of Statistics does new surveys of household consumption expenditure, and accordingly, it adjusts the weight in the CPI series. So, but because of COVID, that activity got delayed by a couple of years. But broadly, the idea behind this activity is to ensure that inflation is representative of current consumption basket, and also it is updated with the current consumption in terms of goods and services. For example, if you look at the old CPI series, there were items like cable TV, library card, VCR, etc. So, whereas if you look at the current inflation series, they have updated the same with items from e-commerce, with entertainment subscriptions that many of us would use, so on and so forth. If you look at the housing, for example, in the previous series, rural housing was not considered, whereas in the current series, rural housing is also considered. If you look at the previous series, the HRA component, which is given to the government employees, which is not a cash component, was also considered. And any adjustment because of pay commission recommendation on the HRA would lead to spike in CPI temporary basis. But if you look at the new CPI series, it's based on actual rental inflation. So a lot of improvement in the new CPI series compared to the old. But the most notable, change in the new CPI series is reduction in the weight given to food. So as our economy is growing, as we are developing, as income and disposable income level of our citizens is rising, they are spending less on food and more on other items. It's very much in line with what happens in advanced economies. So as income levels of citizens rise, they start to use more durable goods, they start to use more services, and their spending on food items goes down. So that's largely what's happening in India as well. So as you can see, what this table largely shows is the change in weight of various items. If you look at food, which has gone from 43.4 to 36.8. If you look at housing, it's gone from 16.9 to 17.7. Transport, of course, takes as citizens spend more on petrol, diesel, uh, cab, etc. That weight has gone up. They're spending more on health, personal care, etc. That's also going up. So broadly, it's more representative of actually the current consumption pattern. But more importantly, if you look at the chart on the you know right hand side, and if you look at the blue line, which is the headline CPI, and if you look at the core CPI, which is the orange line, if you see, because of high weightage of food, and as because of as we know, because of monsoon patterns, food prices become quite volatile. It also affects headline CPI because of high weightage. So if you see in 2000, for example, 17 and 2019, we saw inflation even going into negative territory. But if you look at the core inflation, which is X of food and fuel, that's largely remained stable across last 10 years and broadly been around 4%. So as food inflation reduces, the weight of core increases in the new CPI, we do expect from a more long-term perspective that inflation will become more stable. That's very, very important for monetary policy because as inflation remains volatile, the central bank always has to keep some cushion at hand. Just to give an example, if the central bank expects inflation to oscillate by 1%, let's say in its forecasting period, it cannot really cut rates to its comfort because they always have this at the back of their mind that inflation can get volatile very soon because of some change in seasonal pattern, and hence they are very circumspect to cut all the way down, or even during the hiking cycle, uh, they keep certain cushion in mind. This, as the volatility reduces, this allows central bank to forecast inflation more accurately. This allows market participants to understand inflation, which is the actual on the ground inflation, rather than supply side shock due to weather patterns. and also take actions accordingly. So broadly, it's very positive from a long-term policy making perspective, whether you look at from RBI or whether you look from market participants. It helps the market participants also to project inflation more accurately.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.